I'm so happy to have you, and I'm so glad that we're going to be talking about pleasure today. Lara Catone is one of my dear friends, and she's also been my mentor for quite a while now and been very instrumental in my healing process with my relationship with my body and with food. Interesting thing is that Lara doesn't come from body image issues or having any of that, but just her transmission and her understanding of the body and pleasure and sexuality is so deeply rooted in her that what she has shared. I specifically went through her Artemis School program, which I will link for you to check out. This program was for practitioners. And in this program, I learned so much about my body, so many things that I'm like, really? Why don't I know that? So many things like I do not know why I did not know that about my cycles or about my anatomy and about how to take care of myself. And it just reminded me of the ways that I was disconnected from my body and the ways that we're, as women, and I'm pretty connected to my body in the scale of connection for women, but see the gap between what is possible and what was happening for me. So we're here to talk to Lara. Go ahead. Do you want to say something to that?
Yeah. Well, I think what you're speaking, this gap is really important, right? And often we're here wherever we are, and we have some idea about what's maybe like an inkling of what's possible, but there's also often a lot of cultural projection, weird stuff on that. And because actually the place where you can go is actually way better than you might imagine and more accessible and more real and more grounded. It's not this like, I don't know what people think, but the learning of the body is what helps bridge the gap, right? Knowing the basic maps of our fertility cycles, of our anatomy, help to bridge that gap.
And bridge it in a way where we become, like I share in it, we become friends with ourselves rather than there's something wrong with our body that we're fixing. So even talking about fertility, it's like understanding our body so well and learning how to work with it rather than the anger that can come up.
Yeah.
And what comes to me when you were saying that, as far as the gap, I'm just thinking of all the commercials that you see around periods and all the things that are making our bodies wrong and bad and dirty. And it's still happening, right?
Yeah.
It's still happening where we smell wrong. We have to hide. And that's so the opposite of what embracing our pleasure and embracing our sexuality is all about. So in all your programs, but in this most current Enraptured Life, you spoke about how burnout and what women really are needing is not more self-care, it's actually pleasure. And I wanted us to speak about that a little bit and for you to kind of pull that apart for us. Because in this group, a lot of people are dealing with emotionally eating, binge eating. They're dealing with a lot of things that we're kind of fighting and trying to fix. And this idea of pleasure, it's like, well, where do I even bring this in and how do I bring this in? So will you share a little bit about what comes up when I ask that?
Yeah. The first thing that's really important is talking about what we mean by pleasure. So when I was talking about like people have this idea of something that exists that they don't know about, but sounds like it's supposed to be better. And our Western culture has a really distorted relationship with pleasure. Also our relationship with sex and the body. That's the underlying message. Bad, dirty, repress, control comes out of this, like the mind controls everything. And at Artemis School, for example, it's kind of like we bring in the sort of bottom up aspect, like the mind has some influence and so does the body. And they're really not separate, but we've tried to create this separation and this sort of control over the body. So what do we even mean when we talk about pleasure? And if you look out specifically at American culture, the way people pleasure is they go shopping, they drink alcohol, they watch TV. It's all forms of actually checking out and repressing, suppressing. It's not actually what I call embodied pleasure. It's a whole different thing. And so the first step on the journey is just to be in an inquiry of, well, what is pleasure for me? What is pleasurable? I think there's also this sort of extreme tendency where it's built into like how we've set up our society, where we work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And then we have a couple days to either sleep or just let loose. And so there's pleasure, again, is quartered off from day-to-day life. So what would it mean to live life connected to pleasure? And pleasure wasn't just a thing for the weekends or after 5 p.m. or after you've worked really, really hard for a year and you get to go on vacation. Like, we didn't put these sort of parameters around when pleasure is okay. So what is pleasure? So pleasure is taking in the present moment in any way. That's the doorway into pleasure. I feel my feet on the ground. Maybe even better, like literally on the earth, like on the grass or the dirt or the sand, right? That's a moment of pleasure. Very simple, everyday pleasures. Or hearing music. Music is a huge part of my life. I play it all throughout the day when I can and have little dance, just because I know music that brings me pleasure. So that's one way I feed myself with pleasure, just music that I love. Food can be a source of pleasure, and it's just taking in small morsels of something and really tasting it, the taste, the texture. So we see that the senses, the sensual self, is a big part of pleasure. And pleasure comes after a really good cry, that sort of clearing that happens. Oh, great, that is pleasure. So it has all of these different flavors and textures. But yeah, just inviting everyone here to start thinking about simple everyday pleasures and letting pleasure in, because we actually have to build our capacity to receive pleasure because of so much of the other weird, distorted messaging around it. So, of course, for women, we've been trained to put everyone else's pleasure before ours. And then to feel bad and guilty, especially if you're a mom, forget about it. Feel bad and guilty for anything you do for yourself. And it's just good to question these scripts. There's value in questioning these scripts, because there's things that we kind of take as true or for granted that don't have to be true.
Yeah.
So
and I'd love to hear people letting us know what comes up for you. What are things that you think about during your day that are pleasurable? I'm thinking what you brought up for me is like the idea of no pain, no gain. It's like we have to go through the pain in order to receive the pleasure. We work really hard, then we get 1 week off. And it's reframing that. It's like even putting my lipstick on, instead of just putting it on, enjoying what it feels like, the whole thing. That's a moment of pleasure. And I think it's about slowing down.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. So that's where the burnout piece, or what I would call resourcing, like calling pleasure a resource for stress relief, for our nervous system, for everything, really, for a juicy life, it can be this huge resource to feed us. And so the slowing down piece is huge, because the body wants to go slow. You think about most animals, because our bodies are animals, right? So most animals, unless they're chasing their dinner or playing, they play, like I'm thinking of dogs right now, they run and play hard. But when they're not doing that, they are moving pretty darn slow, right? I always like thinking about the big cat too, as an example of this. So the mind moves so much faster than the body. And so most of the time we're like going, trying to it's like a taskmaster or a lion tamer, like the mind cracking the whip at the body. And no wonder the body shut pleasure out, or sensation out, right? Because pleasure is sensation. To keep up with that pace, we start to have to get a little numb. And there's no blame or wrongness about that. It's the world we were all born into. And it really is a devotion. I like to think about devotion to pleasure, to the body, live a different story, to really live an embodied, present, sensual, pleasureful life. So that slowing down, when you take that moment and you stretch it out, the nervous system just goes, oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm wondering if anyone else is feeling that as Lara's talking, if you're feeling that sense of relaxation in your body. I know I woke up today feeling very grouchy. I've been feeling really kind of uncomfortable and a little emotional. And I went on a walk to feel around me, to get out of my head and more connected to what's really true. And so looking around and seeing the sky and feeling the wind and feeling the sun and letting my body receive that is such a gift to, as you're saying, to the nervous system.
Yeah. When you feel the sun on your skin, that's pleasure, right? That feels good. It's pleasure. It's tending to that part. And so the nervous system kind of takes a big sigh, can kind of, oh, okay, we can relax for a moment. Ultimately, it's sending a signal of we're safe. If you can take in some pleasure, the body's feeling safe. If it's hard to take in pleasure, the body's probably not feeling safe. And again, no judgment around feeling safe, feeling not safe. There's plenty of reasons why one wouldn't feel safe, but we can teach our bodies to feel safe by taking in these little bits of pleasure. We were talking about this idea of self-care versus something else, the framing of self-care, how that can be, it can be like another thing on our to-do list.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. And that's one more thing.
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm a woman who has to have self-care. Now I put that into my schedule. And that can just be another thing of overwhelm. And so the idea of pleasure and the idea of just changing how we are in our lives and not having to create any more time in our day, but just the way that we do things and the way that we connect to ourselves. And so in our relationship with our food and our body and body image, it helps us to stop the emotional eating and stop the binge eating are these self-care tools or these pleasure tools, because we're giving our bodies another way to deal with the emotion. And so what I heard you say, Lara, which was really, I think, important, is the slowing down to know that we don't feel safe. The feeling of not feeling safe, even the acknowledgement of that and knowing that and kind of presencing that and slowing down with that is quite a healing moment.
Yeah. And what we teach now and everything I teach basically is this orienting. So how to orient, which means just taking in your surroundings in a way through your eyes, through your body, like we talked about, feet on the ground, feeling that, feeling the air, the sun on your skin. And every time we do that, it seems so basic in this way, but every time we do that, we're orienting as animals. That's what animals do, right? You see a deer is eating some grass or something in the woods, there's a sound. What does it do? It looks up, checks it out. And so we're engaging, pleasure is very much connected to this animal, primal, also just, there's another word, but it's the essence of being in a body, really, right? The essence of being in a body. I always say pleasure is our birthright. That's why we're in the body. It's to experience pleasure. And we don't know pleasure without pain. The universe brings plenty of pain. We don't need to try to add any. So we can cultivate pleasure and we'll still get plenty of growth opportunities because that's the nature of being a human. And we can also move through some of that pain, whether it's physical pain, emotional pain. Pleasure can be an ally accompanying you on that journey. And in terms of self-care and all of this, the body will also guide you to what it needs if you take that time to slow down. I love your example of, oh, I'm in my head, I'm feeling all these things. So I just went out and went for a walk, just slowed down, took in my surroundings, had a change of perspective going out for a walk. And did you have your big cry after that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And your body's like, you need to cry. You need to cry it out. And you don't have to force it. It just happens. So there's a way when we can slow down, when we can orient to our surroundings and take in any amount of pleasure, whether it's a beautiful flower or the sun or a smell or a taste, the body will start to show you what the next thing is that it needs, versus like, now we have to do this practice or schedule this thing. It actually doesn't have to cost any money. It doesn't have to take really any time, which is crazy. It really doesn't have to take any time. It can be any moment throughout the day.
Thank you for that reminder. It's like the change in perspective. It's permission is really what it is. And, you know, we're talking about pleasure. And then as you were saying that, when I'm thinking about pleasure, and I'm thinking about like primal pleasure, like the sexual energy, the sexual healing, the sexual pleasure, and what happens when we really connect to that. You know, a lot of clients will say to me, I will get the partner after I've lost the weight or after I feel comfortable having someone see my body, and reframing that to like, your pleasure and your sexuality is for you. So it is even just getting in relationship to pleasuring yourself and having your own sexual energy and using that for healing. It is so healing. And when we really let go of this idea of pleasure, that our body is about what we look like, and we drop into this deep primal sexual energy of like orgasm or waves of ecstasy, that can reframe how we are with our bodies. So do you have anything to say around that?
That's huge. Yes, it's everything. So it's the difference between my body and my pleasure is for someone else, someone else's gaze, someone else's orgasm, someone else's whatever needs, you know, the programming goes that deep. I mean, I had 2 clients not too long ago today. I feel like we talked about this with both of them. Like, your body is for you. End of story, period, you know? And we are indoctrinated into a world where there's a feeling like our bodies are here for other people's needs, wants, desires, enjoyment, pleasure. And so in the research we've done with the Artemis School participants that you participated in, that was one of the biggest things that happened for people. They spoke to over and over and over again, this power that happens when they realized in themselves that pleasure, I like to say pleasure is an inside job. It's not just like when someone else gives me pleasure, when someone else thinks my ass looks good. It's like, damn, my ass looks good for me, you know, or it feels good to touch my body, you know, whatever part of your body, even just like the place you can start is just like your own hand or your own face. It doesn't have to be this like real sexual thing to start with. If we can even just, oh, okay, my skin feels good. It feels good to touch. It feels good to receive touch. So that is everything. And it's just something, even us talking about it, I hope, you know, because you have to be able to see it. You have to be able to see that you were trained to give your body to the world, to your children, to your partner, to whatever.
To the gaze of another. You be sexy, you look sexy. And what happens is it becomes an addiction. Then you get attention from others. And then that's how you feel sexy, rather than like the pleasure, the sexuality comes from within, and it doesn't matter what I'm wearing. You know, I'm wearing something that feels good to me, and it doesn't matter what I'm getting from the outside.
Exactly. Yeah. So that is huge. I mean, we've just named it. So hopefully people are like having an experience of that. And also to know that's possible, because we can hear that and be like, oh, that sounds like a cool idea, but I can't even imagine how to begin to feel that for myself. And it's just like, one little moment at a time, one little bit of pleasure at a time. We generate our own pleasure. And guess what? Sex is never going to be satisfying if you're not generating your own pleasure. So if people are having a dissatisfying sex life, it is not, I mean, skills of partners are also important. I'm not going to say that's not important at all, but even to know, so this is another thing that women that have worked with me say, like a shift in this place. And it's really a shift in their own power. Like power and pleasure are intertwined completely. So when we are in our pleasure, we are in our power. And there's plenty to say about that. But as an example, we ask women, what has been your experience, the shifts that have happened after doing this work? And over, the reflection is, I stopped tolerating. I stopped tolerating discomfort. I stopped tolerating bad touch. I stopped tolerating bad sex. I stopped tolerating emotionally unavailable men, so a number of things that happen that start to unfold and unravel in your life when you make this subtle and ginormous shift to embodied pleasure. That's what I'm saying. We've got to not just think about it as just this superfluous extra thing. It is your life force, it's your power, it's your intuition. It's all connected to pleasure.
Oh my gosh, Lara, I have so many chills going up and down me. I'm just like, yes. Oh, just like the shift of awareness, the shift of like, pleasure is not outside. It's not about me just pleasuring partner. It's about me making my own pleasure such a priority that does feed others. And this is the thing. It's like the opposite of being selfish. It is, for some people, it's like, well, that feels like I'm leaving my life or my partner, or it's like, no, it's the opposite. It's like by being fully resourced, we as women are giving so much from the truth, from our power, like really connecting to that. And I mean, just hearing you say it, like I'm feeling that reactivation in myself.
I have some image, it's like breaking the Cinderella spell, the passive sleeping princess, breaking that spell that we all have. We all start or receive that somewhere along the way.
All of you that are watching this, I'm sure feeling the power, feeling something open up in you, a seed planted, something feeling alive. And in my experience, this journey of pleasure, of guiding, of being in the body is something that often needs support around and guidance and care. So I really invite you to check out Lara's work. And as we were talking about it before we started, Lara has such a neutrality around body image, and she holds this beautiful space of like all bodies are beautiful. And it's not even about that. It's not even in the conversation because it's just so real and true in her experience. So she comes from this place of such mastery in being a woman in her body and really walking her walk and talking her talk and being still a student of life and a student of pleasure and a student of sexuality and all of this. And as you were saying, you alluded to before, your work is turning in a new way. So it's very exciting to see where, you're always growing and learning. So I'm going to put in her links, which is laracatone.com. And she does have a program called Enraptured Life that if you go to that website, I mean, you're just going to be like, oh my God, yes. Is there anything else you want to say about your work or anything else that you want to share with us all or leave us with?
Well, just thank you. Thank you for inviting me here and letting me share here. And also just to say the group piece is another really important. I mean, the fact that you're all in a group already. So that's a huge part, a community, resourcing from community. That's already great that everyone's already here. It's like such a huge part of the journey is being held in that community. So I just wanted to hold that up because it's so important. And people are welcome to check out Enraptured Life. And there's also some free things on the Artemis School website. Like we have a secret library if they just want to try things. We have some cool practices on YouTube too. So there's free things to get a little taste that they'll find their way to.
Thank you so much, Lara. I'm so happy that you were able to be with us today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Marla.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Love you.